It's the summer of 1985, and one of the most prolific serial killers is on the loose. He is very calculated. He rides the highways and preys on innocent teenage girls. His name is Robert Benjamin Rhodes, aka the Truck Stop Killer. Robert was born November 22nd, 1945 in Council Bluff, Iowa. Now, Robert's childhood was a relatively normal one from what I read. He was mostly raised by his mother because his father was in the military. He would participate in multiple extracurricular activities at his high school, such as football and wrestling. And as well, he was well respected around the town, besides being known for a few social issues. Now, he had some problems in his later teenage years. He would be arrested twice, one for tampering with a car, and second, getting into a fight in public. There's not too much known on his early life, so we can assume he pretty much grew up normally. Now, his trouble would start in 1964 when he joined the Marine Corps. He would be dishonorably discharged for being involved in a burglary. Now, at that same time, his father would be arrested and charged with essaying a 12-year-old girl. So it makes you wonder, was his childhood as normal as everyone makes it out to be? Also, if you're liking this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, what story would you like to see be told on this channel? Comment down below. Now, after being discharged, he would try his hand in college. He wouldn't last long, dropping out before he even finished the first semester. After trying a multitude of different career choices, nothing felt fulfilling until finally he found truck driving. Now, between the time of him being discharged and finding a career in truck driving, he would be married 3 separate times and having a son. He was also reported to be very abusive. Now, Robert is linked between 4 and 50 plus unalivings. There's no way to know how many. Because he was a truck driver, he could unalive someone one night and be a couple of states away within the next 48 hours. Now, I found a rather interesting story of someone who survived one of his attacks. It takes place in Pennsylvania in 1985. Now, if you are curious to see all of his cases that he has been charged with, I'll leave a link in the description so you can check them out. Now, his rampage takes place over multiple states. As well, I do apologize for my voice again. I'm still dealing with my allergies. But let's take a look at Vanessa, who was a runaway teen. Now, exactly why she ran away from home is unclear, but we can assume it was not for no reason. Vanessa would travel down the road a few miles from her house and end up at a truck stop. Talking with one of the drivers, she would ask for a ride. She just wanted to get away from Pennsylvania. She didn't really have a clear destination. The driver would agree. She would hop in his truck, and he would pull up to the diesel pump because he had to get some gas. Now, Vanessa would start looking around, lost in thought, and thinking about starting her new life, when something would catch her eye. People were gathering around a dumpster, and as she watched them gather around the dumpster, she heard someone say, "She's dead, she's dead." They had found a body of a teenage girl who was also a runaway. Vanessa started thinking about how that could have been her, and wondering who could have done that to somebody. She also thought, what if it's the guy I'm riding with? What if he did it? As she thought that, the man would return. He told Vanessa that he needed to get going. He didn't want to get caught up in anything that would cost him more time, and would immediately release the parking brake. As they pulled away, They were both pretty silent. Vanessa was looking in the rearview mirror and could see them putting up crime scene tape. Now, could you trust anyone in this situation? What would you do? Would you have stayed in the truck or got out? Comment down below. Now, Vanessa would be fine the whole trip, making it all the way to Ohio. She says they drank Diet Coke and listened to Bruce Springsteen the whole way there. Now, in Ohio, they would stop and have lunch together, and he would pay for it for Vanessa. Vanessa said that this man was a good guy. He didn't try anything with her or do anything. He kept his distance and respected her. She would ride with him for several more days, and everything would go smoothly. They would eventually end up in South Carolina, where they would part ways. Now, in South Carolina, she would meet with another truck driver, willing to give her a ride. Now, she noticed something off about him almost immediately, but it was kind of subtle. So because she thought she was just paranoid, she would get in his truck and they would head off. Now, once out on the road with this man, he would completely change. His whole personality, everything. He started smirking and talking about the girl in the dumpster. And he would ask Vanessa if she ever heard of the Laughing Death Society. Now, very confused, she would look at him and he would have a big grin on his face. And she would just be silent. Now, as he turned to her and looked with this huge grin on his face, he would say, "We laugh at death." The air would grow extremely awkward, and they would just sit in more silence, making it even more awkward. Then he would suddenly stop and pull over to the side of the road. They were completely surrounded by woods in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina. She would be very, very scared. He would stare out in the distance for a moment. As she stared at him, he would turn his head and look at her and tell her to get in the back of the cab. She was completely taken by shock. Fear ran over her. She was terrified. He would look at her again and say, "Get in the back of the cab," and he would pull out a big hunting knife. Vanessa would start pleading for her life, saying everything she could to try and get him to calm down. Eventually, she realized her words were for nothing. He would just stare at her, almost as if he was just staring through her blankly. There was no emotion in his eyes. And as he stared at her, he would say something. He would say, "Run." Vanessa would immediately open the door and bolt into the woods. She would hide. Now, she would hide for hours in the woods, unsure if this man was coming after her or not. Eventually, she would find a ride back to town. This older man in a truck would be driving by and she would run up to him. Now, Vanessa would not go to the police. She kept her story hidden until his capture 5 years later. What would you have done? Would you have gone to the police? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, Robert Rhodes is connected to multiple different unalivings. In 1994, Rhodes was convicted of first-degree unaliving in Illinois for the unaliving of Regina Walters. Now, he would receive a sentence of life without parole. In 2005, he was extradited to Utah to be tried for the unalivings of Candace and Douglas. However, the victims' families requested the charges be dropped. He was already serving a life sentence anyways, and they did not want to have to testify more than once. So Rhodes was returned to prison. Now he would be extradited again to Texas for the unalivings of Walter and Jones, where Rhodes, in exchange for having the death penalty, he would plead guilty. That way he could receive a second life sentence. Rhodes continued serving his life without parole sentence at the maximum security correctional center in Chester, Illinois. April 1st, 1990, Mike Miller, an Arizona state trooper, pulled up to a semi-truck parked on the side of the road. Seemingly abandoned, he approached the vehicle, and as he peered inside, he noticed a woman chained up, naked. She was shaking uncontrollably. Hey guys, this is Jordan with Dark Cabin Theories. This is part 2 of our podcast on the truck stop killer. Now, there is some rather vulgar language in this episode, so viewer discretion is advised. The last episode was a first-hand story of a woman who encountered him while hitchhiking. She had ran away from home. If you have not seen that video yet, I'll leave it in the description. I recommend watching it first because it does have a lot of things that are relevant to this story. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, Mike Miller, after he saw the woman in the truck, he would arrest the driver of the semi. That would be Robert Ben Rhodes. For over a decade, Rhodes has been abducting and torturing women. He would bound them and do unspeakable acts, then kill them. Rhodes has only confessed to 3 murders, but it is suspected that he is responsible for a multitude of other murders. The hardest part about proving that he did more murders is simply he hasn't confessed. He's a truck driver. He would abduct people in one state, murder them in another, then be across the country in 36 hours, leaving little to no evidence behind of how they were murdered and who could have done it. Now, it is believed that his spree started in the 1970s. His victims consisted of young hitchhiking girls and sex workers. He was primarily looking for targets that wouldn't cause a scene getting into his truck. Looking for women who would just voluntarily get in because either A, they're hitchhiking, or B, he's getting a service from them. Now let's go back to Mike Miller. When Mike Miller, the state trooper that confronted Rhodes about the chained up naked woman in a semi, he talked to Rhodes about it, what was going on, what was happening. And aggressively, Rhodes would say that this is a private matter and it's consensual. Now, of course, Mike did not believe him at all. He was very frantic, and Mike saw right through his charade. He would arrest Rhodes, and he would call for backup so they could search the semi. Now, as he was waiting for backup, he discovered a .25 caliber pistol on Rhodes' person. Now, they would take him in at this point, but Rhodes was only being charged with kidnapping and assault until 3 of his speculated 50-plus murders were uncovered. It's assumed that the first murder, the one that he confessed to, happened in January of 1990. Now, of course, like I stated earlier, he is speculated to have started killing around the 1970s when he first started his truck driving career. While in custody in Arizona, he would confess to killing Patricia Walsh and Douglas Zinkowski. They were hitchhiking from Seattle to Atlanta. He had picked them up in Texas. Now, he would kill Douglas immediately and leave him on the side of I-10 just outside of a small town called Ozona, Texas. He would keep Patricia prisoner in his semi for almost 2 weeks, beating her and raping her. He would finally shoot her and leave her body in a random canyon in Utah. Very soon after, Rhodes would repeat this same act on Regina Walters and Ricky Jones. Regina was only 14 years old. They were both, her and Ricky, both from Pasadena, Texas. Now, what is really sad in this case is he would keep Regina hostage for several weeks. Photographs that Rhodes took over time showed how Regina went from having no bruises and shorter hair to her hair growing out over time and her developing multiple bruises. He also took pictures of how he tortured her with fish hooks and other objects. Now, he would finally end her suffering and dump her body in an old barn in Illinois. Rhodes, while he had Regina imprisoned in his semi, would stop at a payphone and call Regina's father and taunt him about his daughter. Rhodes would be given, ultimately, a life sentence in Illinois for the murders of Regina and Ricky. Now, one thing the police did find on the film that contained all the pictures of Regina was another photo of another woman. There was just one of her, just one random woman. They did not know who it was, nothing else to go off of. They had no idea. So in 2015, several agencies posted the photo trying to identify the woman in the picture. Now, the police were just assuming she was another one of these victims. They had no evidence on the multitude of other victims that they speculated that he had done. So they might have just found evidence for at least another victim. But this woman would see herself on the Facebook photos. Her name is Pamela Milliken. She's from Canada. Now, she was a hitchhiker back around 89 to 90. She was going from her home in Canada to her brother's house, who lived quite a long distance away. That's where she found Rhodes at a truck stop. They would discuss him giving her a ride, and of course he would agree to that. Now, as soon as Pamela got into the truck, Rhodes did something weird. He immediately took a photo of her, that same photo that was posted on Facebook. When she asked him, why did you do that? He told her that he likes to keep records of everyone he gives rides to in case he gets robbed. Now, if you were in this situation, you're a hitchhiker, and you ask some random truck driver for a ride, what would you think if they just randomly snapped a picture of you? It kind of makes sense that you would want to keep, quote-unquote, a record of everyone you give rides to in case you're robbed. But why are you thinking like that? It's a convenience of a story to me. But also, I was not in that situation. I don't know how I'd react. What about you? Comment down below. Now, Rhodes would tell her that she could either give him cash, grass, or a sexual favor. Pamela, not having any cash and did not smoke at the time, decided to give him what she says, in her own words, a consensual sexual favor. He would give her a ride to Winnipeg and drop her off at a bus station. Now, Pamela is very fortunate. I don't know what would have happened to her had she stayed with him longer. Why didn't he do anything to her? Was it because she gave him the sexual favors? Why was she ultimately okay? I wonder if she ever thinks about that. I would definitely think back to something like that if I was given a ride by somebody who's murdered multitude of people in the past. I would have a surreal moment of, wow, I didn't get chosen. I was very fortunate. What do you think? Comment your thoughts down below. Now, Robert Ben Rhodes is 74 years old now. He is serving 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole in Illinois. Now, one thing I will say, reading about Rhodes, is a lot of law enforcement officers who have been around him always describe him as pure evil. They say that he gives them the weirdest feelings, like they're almost looking at the devil himself. They say that he is just not human. Nobody ever talks about him in a different manner than he has no feelings, nothing. There is nothing there but blank. Now, what they saw in his truck are indescribable. What do you think? Is he responsible for more than just 3 murders? The only real evidence, which is not even enough to charge him with, so I wouldn't even call it evidence, is law enforcement has his logbooks. His logbooks match different disappearances of 50 plus women across the country. He was around the areas that they went missing in and the areas that they were found, and some of them just missing who were never found. Is that purely coincidence in some cases? Or is he responsible for every single one of them? Now, another thing is, the women are ones that fit the description of who he's targeting: sexual workers and hitchhiking young girls. Comment podcast ideas down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.